The Kreenim ambassador recoiled in horrified terror as the human diplomat emerged from the shuttlecraft, but to Nicholas Simmons it was nothing new. Humanity always answered the call, when every other species cowered and quivered in abject fear. Nicholas Simmons stepped onto the landing pad of Kren Prime, standing tall at 6'2", a towering presence next to the insectoid Kreenim officials. Short brown hair crowned his head, but nothing captured attention more than his icy blue eyes, piercing, bright, unblinking, the eyes of a human sizing up his mission. Ambassador Pryler was first to greet him. The alien stood 7 feet tall, a chitinous black shell gleaming in the harsh artificial light, 6 compound eyes swiveling independently on stalks to size up the lone earthling. "The Federation sends a lone human to treat with us? Is this some jest?" Pryler clicked, clearly unimpressed. Nicholas ignored the slight, falling into step next to the creature as they navigated the busy streets of Krenthar. Buildings towered above them, blocky grey shapes jutting into the sky, bristling with pipes and wires. Ships buzzed between landing pads. Aliens of all description crawled on the streets. And yet the atmosphere was tense, charged, fearful. Pryler relayed the reason the Krenim had requested aid: an unprovoked attack, raids on their outposts and colonies by an enemy known only as the Voth. "Our fleets are decimated, cities destroyed. Despite our technology, the Voth attack without warning and without mercy." That was the real reason for Nicholas's mission, not diplomacy, but threat assessment. Humanity had to know the risks, had to determine if the Voth were coming for them next. Nicholas needed to see their weapons, ships, tactics, and he'd use the Krenim as a proxy to do it. Suddenly sirens screamed. Soldiers charged the streets, civilians scattered. A Kreenim warrior, weapon raised, antennas quivering, sprinted to the ambassador. "Pryler! Voth ships incoming! A full invasion fleet!" The insectoid froze, then slowly turned to Nicholas. "The Voth are here in force. Our defenses will not hold. They bypass our shields, shatter our hulls." His voice trembled. "I hope you humans are as strong as you claim. You face the Voth now, and they have never known defeat." Nicholas walked briskly through the halls of the Kreenim High Command Center, the underground bunker, shaking from the impacts of the Voth fleet above ground. Pryler led him into a large room with screens showing footage of the orbital battle. Admiral Zorkal and General Vornak were pacing back and forth, arguing about defensive strategies. "We need to launch a full frontal assault," General Vornak shouted. "No, we must conserve our forces and focus on protecting the planet's surface," Admiral Zorkal countered. Nicholas watched the screens, seeing the sleek Krenim warships engaging the massive organic Voth vessels. The Krenim ships fired volleys of plasma torpedoes and directed energy beams, but the Voth ships had advanced shielding that absorbed the attacks. The Voth returned fire, huge energy blasts that shattered the Krenim hulls. Nicholas pulled out his encrypted communicator. "This is Nicholas Simmons requesting immediate assistance from the Earth Federation fleet. The Krenim are under heavy assault by the Voth and require urgent support." Pryler turned to him, compound eyes wide. "You call for your own kind, do you not trust our strength?" Nicholas met his gaze. "I've seen this before. These Voth are too powerful. Humanity has experience fighting enemies with superior technology. Let us help." Admiral Zorkal narrowed his eyes. "And what would humanity demand in return for this aid?" "A formal alliance between Earth and the Krenim. Mutual defense, open trade, exchange of technology and tactics. Together we can stop the Voth." The bunker shook again as more plasma blasts struck the surface. Zorkal considered for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. I will accept this alliance for now. But do not think to take advantage of our situation, human." Nicholas turned back to the screens, watching as the Voth ships tore through the Krenim defenses. Their hulls looked almost alive, pulsing with energy. Suddenly, he noticed a pattern. The Voth shields flickered each time they fired their main cannons, a weakness. "Admiral, focus your attacks on the Voth propulsion systems, at the rear of their ships. Their shields weaken each time they fire. We can disable them." Zorkal relayed the orders. The Krenim ships changed tactics, aiming torpedoes at the Voth engines. Several Voth ships reeled as the plasma burned through their shields and hulls. Explosions lit up the sky. The room shook, sparks flying from overloaded systems. Chunks of rock fell from the ceiling as the Voth blasts pounded the surface. Nicholas gripped the console, meeting Pryla's gaze. "Brace yourself. This fight has only just begun." But Zorkal narrowed his compound eyes. "What choice do we have, General? Let the human try." Nicholas nodded grimly. Zorkal turned, clicking orders. "Summon our finest warriors, prepare the teleporters, make haste." Minutes later, Nicholas stood on the teleport pad surrounded by 6 towering Krenim soldiers, heavily armed with plasma rifles and blades. The world flashed white, and suddenly they were on the Voth ship. A massive chamber of pulsing conduits and biomechanical machines. Alarms blared. Strange insectoid humanoids clad in battle armor charged, opening fire with energy weapons. The Krenim returned fire, green plasma bolts striking shimmering shields. Nicholas rolled, ducking behind a bulkhead, firing precise shots that punched through the Voth defenses. 2 Krenim fell, cut down by searing beams. Nicholas popped up, sprinting forward, dodging blasts with superhuman speed. He leapt, slamming an armored fist into a Voth soldier's skull plating. Bones cracked, the alien crumpled. "The control room is ahead," Nicholas shouted, consulting a holomap. "Push forward." They battled through the organic corridors, a running firefight of plasma and energy blades. At last they reached a huge circular chamber. Towering Voth in heavy armor guarded a glowing sphere at the center. Nicholas glimpsed strange runes etched into the orb's surface. The main weapon controls. The Voth opened fire. Nicholas dove, rolling behind a console. Plasma scorched the air. The Krenim took cover, blasting away at the defenders. Nicholas unslung his rifle, pumping shot after shot into the Voth line. Soldiers fell, smoking holes punched through armor. Seizing the moment, Nicholas vaulted over the barricade, sprinting for the control sphere. But a shadow fell across him. A massive Voth warrior in ornate battle plate, gripping a humming energy glaive. The alien warlord thundered, "I am Commander Zakvor of the Voth Empire. Face me, human filth." Zakvor lunged, glaive slashing down. Nicholas parried with his rifle, barely deflecting the blow. The force drove him to one knee. He rolled away as Zakvor struck again, cleaving a console in 2. Sparks flew, alarms wailed. Nicholas came up firing, plasma bolts pounding Zakvor's shields. The commander snarled, surging forward, glaive whirling in a storm of crackling energy. Nicholas ducked and dodged, rifle bucking as he poured fire into the Voth's defenses. The world faded away, narrowing to the 2 rivals locked in deadly combat, trading blows in a whirlwind of plasma and blade. Nicholas felt his rifle growing hot, overworn, felt his own breath rasping in his lungs. He was tiring, slowing. With a final mighty blow, Zakvor knocked the rifle from Nicholas's hands. The Voth loomed over him, glaive raised for the killing stroke. Around them, the battle still raged between Krenim and Voth. Plasma fire filling the air, the deck running slick with blood. The fate of worlds, of galaxies, would be decided in the next few seconds. Nicholas reached for his belt, fingers closing around the grip of a plasma pistol, his last weapon. He knew he'd have only one chance, one final desperate gambit, with the lives of billions hanging in the balance. Nicholas drew his plasma pistol in a flash, aiming at the glowing control sphere. But before he could fire, Zakvor lunged, glaive screeching against the human's armored forearm. The pistol spun away. The 2 enemies crashed together, trading blows in a whirlwind of slashing claws and armored fists. All around them, the Krenim soldiers battled the remaining Voth, green plasma fire filling the air. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. The deck shook as the dreadnought exchanged fire with the Krenim fleet outside. Zakvor snarled, reptilian eyes blazing. His glaive hammered Nicholas's defenses, the human barely parrying each blow. Nicholas ducked a decapitating slash, lashing out with an armored boot. It caught Zakvor in the chest, sending him staggering back. In that half-second, Nicholas saw it. A glowing amulet hanging around Zakvor's neck, pulsing with the same energy signature as the control sphere. The ship's power source. Nicholas charged, feinting a punch. Zakvor moved to block. At the last instant, Nicholas dropped, sliding beneath the glaive, hand snaking out. His fingers closed around the amulet, and he wrenched with all his strength. "No!" Zakvor's howl shook the chamber. The amulet hit the deck and shattered in a blaze of light. Instantly, the control sphere went dark. Alarms blared. The ship lurched as its weapons fell silent. On the view screens, the Krenim fleet saw their chance. A concentrated barrage hammered the flagship's hull, tearing through armor, ripping open compartments to space. The dreadnought shuddered under the onslaught. Zakvor attacked with redoubled fury, glaive a blur. Nicholas met him blow for blow, armor sparking, bones shaking from the impact. The Voth pressed the human back toward the sputtering control sphere. Conduits ruptured overhead, spraying flame. Bulkheads buckled. The flagship was coming apart, the Krenim fleet tearing it to pieces. With a final effort, Nicholas ducked a killing blow and lashed out, knocking the glaive from Zakvor's hand. It clattered away across the buckling deck. The human leveled his pistol at the warlord's unprotected face. Zakvor spat, eyes burning with hate. "The Voth do not surrender, human. We do not beg. We fight to the last breath, even in the face of annihilation. You may destroy us, but we will never submit to your kind." A tremendous explosion rocked the ship. A wall blew out, and the shriek of escaping atmosphere filled the chamber. Zakvor disappeared in a hurricane of shrapnel and flame, blasted out into the void, still screaming defiance. Nicholas and the surviving Krenim soldiers, protected by their armored suits, could only watch as the flagship disintegrated around them. The Voth fleet was in full retreat, the dreadnoughts scattering before the Krenim onslaught. In a flash of light, the strike team vanished, teleported back to the surface. They materialized in the Krenim command bunker to a chorus of cheers. Admiral Zorkal and General Vornak were first to greet them, clasping Nicholas's hand. "So you've done it, human," Zorkal said, eyes bright. "The Voth fleet is in full retreat. Kren Prime is safe. The Krenim owe you a debt we can never repay." Nicholas met his gaze, exhausted but victorious. "This is only the beginning, Admiral. The Voth will be back, but next time we fight them together, humans and Krenim, side by side. This is a new era for both our kinds." In the command center, Nicholas stood with Admiral Zorkal and General Vornak, assessing the damage reports from across Kren Prime. The Voth attack had been costly, but thanks to Nicholas's daring raid, they had prevailed, for now. Zorkal turned to Nicholas, compound eyes gleaming. "You have proven yourself a true ally to the Krenim, Nicholas Simmons. We owe you a great debt. I hereby formally agree to the alliance you proposed between our peoples." Nicholas clasped the Admiral's chitinous hand. "Together we'll be stronger. The Voth won't catch us unprepared again." As Krenim and human officers began exchanging tactical data and technology schematics, Nicholas pulled Zorkal aside. "Tell me, Admiral, what do you know of the Voth's origins, their empire?" Zorkal's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Our intelligence indicates they were once the dominant power in the galaxy, eons ago, but their empire crumbled and they faded into myth, until now." An idea took shape in Nicholas's mind. He zoomed in on the Red Star system. "I propose a joint expedition to this Voth Prime, a small team to gather intel on their history, culture, potential weaknesses, knowledge we can use." Zorkal hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Bold, risky, but you've earned my trust. I approve." A comms officer interrupted urgently. "Admiral Zorkal, incoming transmission from Earth Federation fleet." Nicholas spun as a familiar face materialized on the view screen, a face he hadn't seen in years. Admiral Novak? Elena Novak, his old mentor, greeted him with a wry smile. Her short grey hair framed piercing green eyes. "Nicholas, I should have known you'd be in the thick of it. Congratulations. The Krenim alliance is a major coup." Pride surged in Nicholas's chest. "Thank you, Mum, but what brings the fleet out here? Not that we don't appreciate the support." Novak's smile turned grim. "The Voth. We've been monitoring them too, and their threat is greater than you know. But we have a plan, a new weapon that could end this war before it begins." Nicholas raised an eyebrow. "Impressive, but risky. How do we deploy it?" Novak leaned forward. "That's where you come in. We need to draw the Voth out, get them to commit their forces to a head-on confrontation. Your alliance fleet will be the bait. Then, when their armada is fully engaged, we strike with the Singularity missiles." It was the audacious plan. But Nicholas had seen the devastation the Voth wrought firsthand, and if this weapon worked, it could save billions of lives. He glanced at Zorkal and Vornak. The Krenim looked thoughtful, assessing the risks and rewards. At last, Zorkal nodded firmly. "We're in, Admiral Novak. With this alliance, the Voth will fall." As the Krenim and Earth officers moved to coordinate fleet movements and finalize battle plans, Nicholas felt a thrill of excitement mingled with grim determination. The Voth had to be stopped, no matter the cost. And with humanity and the Krenim fighting side by side, they would be. This was a turning point. Nicholas could feel it, a chance to forge a new future. He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. It was time to get to work. Nicholas marched through the corridors of the KSS Forthal, jaw clenched. The Krenim's most advanced warship thrummed around him, a symphony of power barely contained. But Nicholas's focus was on the task at hand. He strode into the engineering bay, a cavernous chamber filled with human and Krenim scientists swarming over a massive cannon assembly. The Earth Federation's experimental phase weapon. Chief Engineer Varik, a grizzled Krenim with cybernetic implants, looked up as Nicholas approached. "Ah, Nicholas, just in time. We're nearly ready." Nicholas nodded, eyeing the cannon. It was huge, easily the size of a shuttle. He'd seen the specs, a phase-shifting beam capable of punching through any known shielding or armor, the ultimate trump card. "The Voth are on their way. Admiral Novak just gave the order to assume formation." Varik grunted. "They took the bait then, fools!" His mandibles clicked as he turned to the cannon. "This beauty will be their undoing, but the calibrations must be precise. The slightest error and we'll be space dust ourselves." For the next several hours they worked, human and Krenim side by side, making delicate adjustments, running simulation after simulation. Nicholas felt the weight of it all. So many lives riding on this. At last Varik straightened. "It's done, she's as ready as she'll ever be." Nicholas exhaled. "Then it's time." He keyed his comm. "Bridge, this is Simmons. Notify all ships. We're moving to Phase 2. Moments later, the ship-wide comm crackled. "All hands, battle stations. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." Nicholas raced through the ship, boots pounding the deck, the wail of klaxons filling the air. He burst onto the bridge just as the first blips appeared on the sensors. "Report," Admiral Zorkal barked. "Multiple hyperspace windows opening, sir," the sensor officer called. "It's the Voth. They're here." Zorkal turned to Nicholas, compound eyes intense. "It's time, human. Man your station. Everything depends on you now." Nicholas sprinted to the gunnery station, strapping himself into the command couch. His hands flew over the controls as he brought the phase cannon online. Power thrummed through the ship, the deck vibrating beneath his feet. On the view screen, the void of space lit up as Voth ships poured out of hyperspace. Dozens of them, then hundreds, monstrous organic dreadnoughts, bristling with weapons, all converging on the human Krenim fleet. Space lit up as the battle was joined. Beams of searing energy crisscrossed the void as the fleets clashed. The Voth came on, heedless of losses, their weapons hammering the Allied ships. Hulls buckled, ships spun away, venting atmosphere. Krenim and human alike died in flames. Nicholas gritted his teeth, hands white-knuckled on the controls. He had to wait for the right moment. Too soon, and the Voth would scatter. Too late, and there'd be nothing left to save. Suddenly, a massive shape emerged from the heart of the Voth formation. A dreadnought, easily twice the size of the others. Its hull was scarred, its armor pitted and scorched. But its weapons were fully charged, a baleful green glow building at its prow. "Zorkal," Nicholas shouted over the din. "What is that thing?" The Admiral's voice was grim. "The VNS Zakvor, named for the commander you slew, and it's aiming right for us." Nicholas felt a chill. This was it, the moment of truth. His finger hovered over the firing stud. On the targeting display, the dreadnought loomed, a monstrous silhouette wreathed in the light of its charging beam. He had only one shot. The deck shuddered as the Zakvor's beam lanced out, a searing lance of energy stabbing towards the Vorthal. Nicholas fired. A blinding flash lit the void as the phase beam leapt from the cannon, a shimmering lance of pure force that crossed the distance in an instant and struck the Zakvor's shields. For a moment the world held its breath. The beam splashed against the dreadnought's defenses, a coruscating wave of energy that seemed to wrap around the ship. The shields flared, pulsing with strain. Nicholas's heart pounded. Had it worked? Then the Zakvor exploded. A sun-bright flash consumed the dreadnought, a roiling wave of plasma and debris expanding outward. The phase beam had punched through, piercing the ship's reactor. The flagship was gone, reduced to glowing fragments. Jaachir went up on the bridge, human and Kreenim voices raised in a chorus of triumph and relief. On the sensors, the Voth fleet reeled, their formations shattering as ships scattered in all directions. "All ships, press the attack," Admiral Novak shouted. "Don't let them regroup. Target their engines, their weapons, drive them back." The battle raged on, but the tide had turned. Shorn of their flagship, the Voth were in disarray, their ships falling one by one before the vengeful guns of the Allied fleet. It was a rout, a reckoning long in coming. At last, the Voth broke, their remaining ships fleeing, vanishing into hyperspace. A ragged cheer sounded over the comm, weary but triumphant. They had won. The Kreenim was safe. The alliance had held. But as Nicholas slumped back in his seat, exhaustion and elation warring within him, he knew this was only the beginning. The Voth had been beaten back, but not broken, and the secrets of their past, the root of their aggression, remained hidden. There were battles still to come, but for now, for this one shining moment, victory was theirs, and Nicholas would savor it, even as he steeled himself for the challenges ahead. In the aftermath of their victory, Nicholas and Admiral Novak met with the Kreenim leadership in the command center. The room buzzed with excitement as they discussed their next steps. "Their Voth homeworld," Nicholas said, pointing at a star chart. "We need to know what secrets it holds, what they left behind." Admiral Zorkal nodded, agreed. An expedition could provide vital intelligence. Preparations began at once. The finest human and Kreenim minds gathered. Scientists, historians, soldiers. They boarded the KSS Pathfinder, a sleek vessel bristling with advanced sensors and defenses. As the ship hurtled through the void, Nicholas paced the bridge, an unshakable feeling of unease gripping him. Admiral Novak noticed, pulling him aside. "You feel it too," she said, green eyes intense. "There's more waiting for us on that world than just ruins. I'd bet my commission on it." The Pathfinder dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Voth system. The viewscreen filled with a desolate planet, its surface scarred and barren, but the sensors told a different story. "Energy readings from below the surface," the science officer reported. "Massive ones, artificial." Nicholas gripped the console. "Take us down." The ship descended, landing beside the crumbling remains of a Voth city. The expedition team assembled, clad in combat armor, weapons ready. They entered the ruins, scanners probing, lights piercing the gloom. They found a hidden portal, biomechanical doors parting with a hiss. Beyond lay a vast subterranean complex, filled with humming machines and pulsing conduits. As they pushed deeper, a sense of dread grew. The technology was advanced far beyond anything the Voth had shown before. Genetic sequencers, cloning vats, biomechanical augmentation rigs. They entered a cavernous chamber, dominated by a towering spire of pulsing energy. As they approached, The spire flared blinding white. A figure coalesced from the light, a hologram of a Voth clad in ancient armor. "I am Zakvor the Eternal," the figure boomed. "The true master of the Voth, and you, interlopers, witness the birth of our resurgence." Around the chamber, dozens of pods hissed open. From each stepped a Voth warrior, eyes blazing with unnatural light, bodies augmented with gleaming metal. Nicholas raised his rifle as the augmented Voth charged, a tide of unstoppable force. The chamber erupted in a storm of plasma fire and flashing blades. Soldiers fell, human and Krenian blood mingling on the cold metal floor. Nicholas fought like a man possessed, rifle bucking, sword flashing, but the Voth kept coming, shrugging off wounds that would fell any normal creature. As he dove for cover behind a sparking console, a desperate plan crystallized in Nicholas's mind. The spire, the energy source powering the facility, if he could overload it, trigger a chain reaction. The fate of galaxies would be decided in the next few minutes, and once again a lone human held the key to salvation or annihilation. Nicholas's mind raced as he formulated his desperate plan. The energy core, the key to shutting down this nightmarish facility. But he needed time. "Admiral Novak, get the team back to the Pathfinder," he barked into his comm. "I'll stay with a few volunteers, buy you time to evacuate." "Nicholas, you can't," Novak started, but he cut her off. "No choice, go now." As the expedition team fell back, Nicholas rallied his hand-picked squad. Sergeant Zara, a fierce Krenim warrior, Lieutenant Vex, a crack shot, Private Klin, a demolitions expert. They took up positions around the chamber, weapons ready. The Voth came, a tide of enhanced flesh and metal. Plasma fire filled the air. Nicholas and his team held the line, rifles bucking, grenades detonating in gouts of fire. But the Voth kept coming. "Fall back to the core!" Nicholas shouted over the chaos. They gave ground, step by step, leaving Voth bodies in their wake. But for each one that fell, two more took its place. Nicholas reached the control panel, fingers flying over the alien controls. "Initiating overload sequence," he panted. "Just need a few—" A shadow fell over him. He spun, coming face to face with Zakvor the Eternal. The Voth leader's eyes blazed with madness, his body augmented to grotesque proportions. "You," Zakvor snarled, "you've ruined everything." Nicholas raised his rifle, but Zakvor moved in a blur. The weapon went spinning. Zakvor's fist slammed into Nicholas's chest, sending him flying. He crashed into a bank of machinery, sparks showering. Zakvor stalked forward, energy crackling around his fists. Nicholas rolled to his feet, drawing his combat blade. They clashed in a whirlwind of strikes and parries, Nicholas's skill and speed pitted against Zakvor's raw power. Around them, the chamber shook. Cracks raced up the walls. The energy core pulsed erratically, a rising whine filling the air. They were out of time. Nicholas ducked a haymaker, blade slicing across Zakvor's thigh. The Voth roared. Nicholas pressed the attack, driving Zakvor back. A massive chunk of ceiling crashed down. Nicholas saw his chance. He feinted left. Zakvor lunged. Nicholas dodged right, kicking out. His boot caught Zakvor in the chest, sending him staggering back, right under the falling debris. Zakvor vanished in a cloud of dust and rubble, buried beneath tons of twisted metal. Nicholas didn't hesitate. He sprinted back to the control panel. They hurled themselves through just as a wall of fire erupted behind them. The shockwave flung them like rag dolls, slamming them into the rocky ground. Nicholas rolled, ears ringing, vision swimming. He staggered to his feet, turning to look back. The facility was gone, replaced by a massive crater. Rubble rained from the sky, smoke billowed into the air. Nicholas limped to the Pathfinder, his team close behind. Admiral Novak was waiting at the ramp, face tight with worry. "Nicholas, thank God, when we saw the explosion—" He managed a weary grin. "Takes more than that to kill me, Admiral." She clasped his shoulder, relief shining in her eyes. "Zakvor the Voth?" "Buried. This whole cursed place is nothing but a tomb now." Nicholas turned to look back at the plume of smoke rising from the shattered earth. In that moment, he felt the weight of it all, the battles, the losses, the victories. It had been a long road, but he knew deep in his bones that this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, more threats to face. But for now he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Against all odds, they had struck a blow against the Voth. They had uncovered their secrets and shattered their twisted dreams of conquest. As he boarded the Pathfinder, ready to return to Kreenim space and share news of their triumph, Nicholas couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. Humanity and the Kreenim, once strangers, were now bound by blood and fire, allies in a war that would shape the galaxy, and he, Nicholas Simmons, would be at the forefront of it all. The Pathfinder lifted off, engines roaring, leaving the desolate Voth world behind. Nicholas stood on the bridge, watching the stars streak past. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. As the KSS Pathfinder sliced through the void back to Kreenim space, its crew buzzed with a mixture of triumph and unease. In the ship's data center, Nicholas pored over the information they'd extracted from the Voth facility, lines of code and schematics flickering across the screens. His brow furrowed as he scrolled through file after file, a sinking feeling growing in his gut. "Commander Simmons, look at this," Lieutenant Vex called from his console. Nicholas crossed the room in a few quick strides, leaning in to examine the display. His eyes widened. Those energy signatures, they're identical to the Voth homeworld facility, but these readings are coming from a dozen different star systems. Vex nodded grimly. "Exactly, and look at these production manifests. Each site seems to be churning out hundreds of those enhanced warriors." Nicholas stepped back, mind racing. The Voth threat was far from neutralized. If anything, they'd only scratched the surface. He keyed the ship's comm. "Admiral Novak, patch me through to Kren Prime. We have an emergency." Hours later, Nicholas stood before a council of human and Kreenim leaders, the weight of his findings heavy on his shoulders. Admiral Zorkal, General Vornak, and a dozen other high-ranking officials listened intently as he laid out the evidence. The Voth have multiple hidden bases spread across the quadrant, each one potentially housing an army of super soldiers. We must act swiftly to locate and neutralize these sites before they can be mobilized against us. The room erupted into a chorus of concerned murmurs and heated debate. At last, Zorkal raised a clawed hand for silence. "Commander Simmons is right. This threat cannot be ignored. I propose a coordinated strike, the full might of our combined fleets, to eliminate these Voth strongholds once and for all." Nods of agreement circled the table. The plan was swiftly drafted, a series of precise surgical attacks to cripple the Voth's secret network before they could strike. As the meeting adjourned and the leaders dispersed to rally their forces, Nicholas's personal comm chimed. He glanced down, brow furrowing at the message from an unknown sender. "Commander Simmons, I have information vital to your cause. The Voth's true purpose, the location of their command center. Come alone to the coordinates below, and all will be revealed." Nicholas's first instinct was to ignore it, dismiss it as a trap, but something about the message nagged at him. Vital information. Could they afford to pass that up? He weighed the risks, then came to a decision. "Admiral Novak, a word." He pulled her aside, showing her the message. "I think I need to investigate this alone." Novak's green eyes flashed with concern. "Nicholas, it's too risky. This is surely a Voth ploy." "Perhaps, but if there's even a chance this informant is legitimate, the potential intel is too valuable to ignore." Novak sighed, then nodded slowly. "Very well, but be careful, Nicholas. Don't take any unnecessary risks." With a grateful nod, Nicholas slipped away, making his way to the Pathfinder's hangar. He prepped a small, stealthy shuttle, running through the pre-flight checks with practiced efficiency. As the hangar doors slid open and he guided the craft out into the starry expanse, he couldn't shake the prickling sense of unease crawling up his spine. The coordinates led him to the fringes of charted space. an unremarkable system far from the bustle of the space lanes. As his shuttle slipped into orbit around a nondescript planetoid, his sensors lit up with an anomalous reading. He leaned forward, squinting at the display. There, in a geostationary orbit, a massive structure shimmered into view as its cloaking field disengaged, a sprawling space station easily dwarfing the largest crenim or human installations. Its hull was a mottled blend of organic curves and harsh angles, bristling with weapons emplacements and sensor arrays. Nicholas's heart pounded as he realized the magnitude of his discovery. The Voth's central command, hidden in plain sight. He reached for the comm to report back, but before he could open a channel, a tractor beam lanced out from the station, seizing his shuttle in an unbreakable grip. He fought with the controls, but it was futile. The beam dragged him in, pulling the tiny craft towards a cavernous hangar bay that yawned open like the maw of some great beast. As the shuttle settled onto the deck with a heavy clang, Nicholas reached for his sidearm, checking the charge. He had no idea what awaited him on board this fortress in the heart of the Voth's domain, but he knew one thing for certain. The true fight was about to begin. The tractor beam dragged Nicholas's shuttle into the cavernous hangar with a shuddering clang. He barely had time to unstrap himself from the pilot's seat before a phalanx of heavily armed Voth warriors surrounded the ship, weapons trained on the hatch. Nicholas checked his sidearm, a compact plasma pistol, and took a deep breath. Then he hit the hatch release and stepped out, hands raised. Nicholas let the pistol clatter to the deck. There was no point in fighting, not yet. The guards parted, and a figure strode into the hangar. Tall, clad in ornate armor, eyes burning with triumphant malice. Nicholas's breath caught in his throat. The Voth leader chuckled, a rasping metallic sound. "You thought me dead, human? Buried beneath the ruins of my own creation? You underestimate the power of the Voth." Nicholas shook his head. "I saw the facility destroyed. Nothing could have survived that blast. And yet here I stand." Zakvor spread his arms, gesturing to the bustling hangar, the rows of sleek Voth fighters, the thrumming reactor at the station's heart. "This is the true seat of Voth power, the nerve center of our glorious resurgence. From here, I have directed our attacks, our conquests, and soon the galaxy itself will be remade in our image." Nicholas's mind raced. If this station had been behind the Voth attacks all along, then taking it out could cripple their war effort. But how? Zakvor was still gloating, reveling in his apparent victory. "You see, human, our goal was never mere conquest. No, we seek to reshape the very fabric of life itself. Through genetic engineering and cybernetic enhancement, we will create a new order, a perfect Voth imperium ruling over a galaxy purged of weakness and impurity." As Zakvor spoke, Nicholas slowly, carefully reached for the hidden transponder in his suit, a device he had hoped never to use, but desperate times called for desperate measures. He activated the transponder with a subtle flick of his finger. A coded signal pulsed out into the void, a call for aid to the human Krenim fleet. It was a gamble. The fleet was far away, engaged in the planning for their coordinated strike. But if they could get here in time... Zakvor was still ranting, caught up in his own grandiloquence. Nicholas tensed, ready to make his move. "Sensor contact," a voice crackled over the intercom. "Multiple hyperspace signatures. It's the human Krenim fleet." Zakvor whirled, eyes widening in shock and rage. "What? How did they find us?" His gaze snapped to Nicholas, understanding dawning. You summoned them." Nicholas smiled grimly. "That's right, it's over, Zakvor. Surrender now, and maybe the Alliance will show mercy." But Zakvor only snarled, drawing a crackling energy blade from his belt. "Mercy! The Voth do not know the meaning of the word, and we do not surrender." He pointed at Nicholas, voice booming. "Kill the human. Prepare for battle. We will show these primitives the true might of the Voth." The soldiers raised their weapons, fingers tightening on triggers. Nicholas tensed, preparing to dodge, to fight. This was it. The moment of truth. The fate of the galaxy would be decided here, in this hangar, in the next few desperate minutes. Nicholas lunged, rolling under the first volley of plasma fire, coming up with fists flying. He smashed into the nearest Voth warrior, feeling chitin crack under his armored gauntlets. The soldier staggered, and Nicholas wrested the plasma rifle from his grip, spinning to fire point-blank into the next attacker's faceplate. More Voth surged forward, a tide of armored bodies and slashing blades. Nicholas fought like a man possessed, rifle bucking in his hands, bones shaking with each impact. He had to get to the control room, had to disable the station's defenses before the fleet arrived. He vaulted over a stack of supply crates, plasma bolts sizzling past his head. The door to the hangar's inner corridor loomed ahead, a knot of Voth warriors guarding it. Nicholas primed a plasma grenade from his belt and hurled it, diving aside as the explosion tore the guards apart in a spray of fire and shrapnel. Nicholas sprinted through the blasted doorway, alarms howling, emergency lights painting the corridors in pulsing red. He consulted the station schematics he had memorized, picturing the route to the command center. Left at the junction, then right past the barracks. Almost there. He rounded a corner and skidded to a halt, breath catching in his throat. A towering figure blocked the passage ahead, energy blade crackling in his grip. Zakvor. "I will not allow you to interfere, human," the Voth leader growled. "This station is the key to our victory, to our ascension, and I will die before I see it in your hands." Nicholas raised his rifle, sighting down the barrel. "Then I'll gladly oblige." They charged each other, a collision of unstoppable force and immovable object. Zakvor's blade slashed down, cleaving Nicholas's rifle in two. Nicholas ducked, lashing out with a boot that caught the Voth in the midsection, doubling him over. They traded blows in a whirlwind of fists and feet. Nicholas's human tenacity pitted against Zakvor's augmented strength. The Voth leader's blade scored a glancing blow, searing across Nicholas's chestplate. Nicholas retaliated with an elbow to the throat, feeling cartilage crunch. Zakvor staggered back wheezing, eyes burning with rage. Nicholas pressed the advantage, hammering blow after blow into the Voth's armored form, driving him back towards the yawning reactor shaft. With a final desperate roar, Nicholas tackled Zakvor, sending them both tumbling over the edge. They plummeted down the shaft, grappling, striking, as the reactor's seething energies licked at their armor. Nicholas managed to snag a protruding conduit, arresting his fall. Zakvor's claws scrabbled at his legs, trying to drag him down. Nicholas kicked out, felt his boot connect with the Voth's faceplate. Zakvor's grip loosened, and then he was falling, howling in fury, vanishing into the boiling depths of the reactor core. Nicholas hung there a moment, gasping, hardly believing he was alive. Then, with a grunt of effort, he hauled himself back up onto the walkway, every muscle screaming in protest. Nicholas stumbled through the blasted doors of the command center, consoles sparking, alarms blaring. Through the viewports, he could see the Alliance fleet swooping in, weapons blazing, hammering at the station's shields. They were taking losses, hulls splitting open, ships spiraling away trailing flame. But they were buying him time. He lurched to the central console, fingers flying over the controls. He had to disable the station's defenses, lower the shields, give the fleet a chance. But as he worked, a flashing warning caught his eye. The self-destruct. Zakvor must have initiated it before their fight, and the countdown was already ticking down. Nicholas swore, mind-racing. If the station exploded now, it would take half the fleet with it. He couldn't let that happen, couldn't let all those lives be lost in vain. He opened a comm channel, signaling the fleet. Admiral Novak's face appeared on the screen, drawn and haggard, eyes widening in surprise and relief as she saw him. "Nicholas, thank the stars, we thought you were—" "No time," he cut her off. "Admiral, you have to get the fleet clear now. I've disabled the shields, but Zakvor activated the self-destruct. This whole place is going to blow." Novak's face paled. "What about you? We can send a shuttle, pull you out." Nicholas shook his head. "No, someone has to stay behind, make sure the station is destroyed. Make sure the Voth can never use it again." He met Novak's gaze, saw the understanding there, the grief. "It's the only way, Admiral. Get our people to safety, and promise Promise you'll keep fighting, that you'll end this war, once and for all. Novak swallowed hard, eyes glistening. I promise, Nicholas, we won't let your sacrifice be in vain. Nicholas nodded, managing a small, sad smile. It's been an honor, Admiral. Give my regards to the Krenim and tell them I'm sorry. He cut the transmission before Novak could respond. Around him, the command center shook, consoles erupting in showers of sparks as the fleet's weapons found their mark. The countdown flashed red, seconds ticking away. Nicholas closed his eyes, picturing Earth, picturing the rolling hills of his childhood home, the faces of his family, his friends. He had fought so hard, come so far, to keep them safe, to make the galaxy a better place. And in the end, that was all that mattered, that his life, his death had meant something, that the Alliance would endure, that hope would endure. The countdown reached 0 and the world went white. A sun-bright flash consumed the station, a roiling wave of plasma and debris expanding outward, engulfing the Voth ships, the defense platforms, everything in its path. From the bridge of the EFS Titan, Admiral Novak watched the explosion paint the void, tears tracking down her cheeks. Around her, the bridge crew sat in stunned silence, the weight of the moment settling over them like a shroud. Novak straightened in her seat, squaring her shoulders. Nicholas's last words echoed in her mind, a promise, a duty. She would keep fighting, they all would, for the Alliance, for the future, for all those who had given their lives to secure it. The war was far from over. The road ahead would be long and hard, strewn with hardship and sacrifice, but they would walk it together, humans and Krenium, side by side, bound by blood and fire, by a shared dream of peace. In the days and weeks that followed, as the Alliance began the slow, painful work of rebuilding, they would remember Nicholas Simmons. They would remember his courage, his resolve, his unwavering belief in the possibility of a better tomorrow. And they would carry on for him, for themselves, for the galaxy. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.